cloud. Okay. So today we're going to go through commercial site grading. I wanted to first, before we get into coming off the building here, I wanted to clarify how to extract feature lines from the corridor model a little more clean. If you right click on any of the corridor modeling and you go into corridor properties, there is this, this dialog here, this feature line dialog. And by default, everything's checked. And how this used to work in Civil 3D is that you would turn, you'd have whatever feature lines. Let me step back for a second. What this does is you have these little point targets. I think we showed it before. See these little circles that are on the edges of the corridor? Every time there's like a break in the slope, like there's a top curve, back curve, all that kind of stuff. These little circles here. So if I have this check mark checked here, that means it will draw a feature line connecting the dots. So we'll go from this sample along the edge of travel way to the next sample, drawing a feature line to the next and next. And that's like linked, it's like in the block. It's only going to actually do that if I check this box, right? So in the rebuilding of the corridor, it's doing that. Now you don't see the line work because the default is set to no display. But if I would turn this on to edge of travel way or edge of road, and I have this checkbox checked, or if I turn this to any style, I could just use general, for example. I don't need to use edge of road, just use general up here at the top. Hit OK and hit OK again. You'll see it will make those connections. So let me just hit that and you can see, oh, okay, now that edge of travel way is all connected up. Now I can grab that feature line, but when I do that, it's in the corridor model. It's in the whole block. So I can right click on the corridor again, hit corridor properties. And you can see, like, even if I'd set these other ones to general, hit OK. So that's edge of travel way, pave 1. So it would be just the next level down. So pave 1, this is edge of travel way, this circle. Pave 1 is this one, right? And you'd say, well, how the heck do you know that? Well, this is my first rodeo with Civil 3D. Remember if you go in the subassembly help, you would see this little figure that looked like this, and it would show you what each point code is. And you just get to know things. You just get to memorize things. Like I know that this is pave 1, this is pave 1, this is pave 2, and this is subbase. So when I go into the corridor properties and I see those things, they're like that in every subassembly that has pavement surface. You just kind of know. Just like your layer standards. Like how do you know that certain things go on a certain layer? Because you just kind of memorize things. Now, the reason you don't see that feature line drawn is because this is not checked. So technically these no displays, I guess, aren't really needed anymore. That's how it's done by default. And that you could just uncheck these checkboxes. Okay. So that is all great, but why are you talking about this? Because ultimately we need to extract, when we're using a corridor model, we usually need to extract the feature line for the furthest extent out. In this example, we were using the edge of travel way and then the back of curve. So what I would need to first do to extract those is to make sure in my corridor properties that they're turned on. All the checks are turned on here. However, they are by default. So these checkboxes are checked on by default. Obviously, if you wanted to, under surface, if you were creating a surface and instead of links, you wanted to use feature lines, that's the other way to, instead of having it build from these top links, you wanted to have it build from the feature lines. So you'd have the center line, then the next sample thing would go over to the edge of travel, that kind of stuff. Well, if you want to use feature lines, you'd have to have, you can see here, I only have one option, edge of travel way. Now, if I go back over to feature line and check this box, I would imagine I probably have to rebuild it. Yeah, if I'd hit apply, then I probably have to exit, come back in. Hold on. If I exit, come back in, this will now have two options in the drop down because I checked that next one on. So the checkbox itself enables you to even have the option to draw those. Now you can see there's now two. Again, these are all on by default. So what I've kind of talked about so far about having to make sure they're on, something to check on. We're actually going to go the opposite direction now, because I really found when I was looking at this some more after we did the last couple sessions that it's very confusing, because when you get in with all these checked in the next dialog that I'm about to pop into, so let me just show you, I guess is the best example. If I just check a bunch of these, even if they're set to no display, a bunch of them are set to no display. If I go to this next dialog, which we've used before, and I go to feature lines, and I hit create feature lines from corridor, and then I pick the corridor model or pick one of the feature lines, and then I hit, for example, we used A for all. I don't think you ever want to use A for all. The way I don't think it works that great, honestly. And that's why we had a bunch of doubled up feature lines. So I'll just hit A for all for now, because we're going to exit the command. But with a bunch of those checked, you get this, you can sort this down, but you're never going to be extracting the base or the pave one or the sub base. So you get in this thing, it's like, oh, everything's checked. That's how it is by default. They're all checked on in your corridor model by default. Then you go into this, which you will need this dialog, and then you have to make sure to unselect everything and then go back down to here and hit, okay, well, I just want the edge of travel way, which is not that big of a deal. But notice here, how we have these couple things, and this list isn't the full extent, but take out mind's eye of that. In reality, to kind of simplify things, if I would just, before I would go to extract feature lines for the corridor, if I go into corridor properties here, uncheck stuff that we're never going to use. Just, the only things we ever really need are going to be edge of travel way and curb, back of curb. So those are the only two. Now these you don't have to change these to say general or anything. These can just stay no display. So that's fine. This was a step before. I'd have to always make them general so you could see them. And then you actually just picked the feature line, then it extracted it out. It kept it dynamic, but it kind of made it selectable as a corridor auto feature line. They rejiggered how this works a little bit. So I'm going to check them on here. I don't care about them, this thing at all. I'm just going to make sure those are checked, or more importantly, you're going to uncheck the rest of them. Then I'm going to hit OK. Now when I go back into this dialog and I hit create feature lines from corridors, you can see it doesn't even matter if I can see them. It makes them available for selection here. So I can pick that. Then it says all or region. Again, I don't think you really want to ever hit all, because the way it extracts the stuff, I've noticed like through the intersections, it wasn't right. It was giving me an edge of travel way that wasn't the edge of travel way. It was actually offset down one. Let me do it again, just to show what I at least saw. Maybe it cleans it up if I do it if I uncheck the other stuff. But you can see now in here this dialog, which I don't love how this is now. I thought it was cleaner and easier before, but we're only seeing the back of curve, and we're only seeing the travel way. We're seeing the left side and the right side of the road, and then we're seeing all the different regions. That's what these are. These are the different regions of the corridor. So you could actually say I want certain regions. I want the left side, right side, and you can actually see there's an edge of travel way in the center of the road too. That is because of how intersections work, because if you remember in an intersection on the curb returns, where actually the baseline is along the curb return, like the curb itself, and it's projecting the lane back up to the center line of the road. Well, just for how that works, and that makes it in that subassembly, that's the edge of travel way. So it's, yeah, this is why I wouldn't, you would never want to extract this, so you could just uncheck it here. So going into this dialog, usually what I recommend is unchecking the whole thing. Technically, if you wanted the edge of travel way for the rest of the whole corridor, I would uncheck where it says center, and then just do left and right. You can leave everything the same. We'll also do the back of curve as well. I'll hit extract. And that's going to do all the regions. And now you can see that this feature line is now when I select it, it selects just that feature line. I was looking at this in minutia before, and it might be better now. Yeah, it looks like it's better now. So that was, I'm glad yeah, like here. I don't know if you can see that, but see how it's carrying the back of curb? This is the, let me see if I can angle this a little bit better. But it's carrying that back of curb line. Whatever this line is, I think it's the back of curb line. Let me zoom in here. No, it's the edge of travel way. Okay, yeah, this was the problem I was seeing before. So you can see through the intersection how I have two edge of travel way lines, right? I have this one, and then I have this one. They're both the edge of travel way, right? This is the one in the back kind of a thing. And this is the one along the edge of the travel way. And then there's another thing here. It's just a mess through here. That's no good. You don't want that. And that's why, so I'm going to back up. What I recommend doing, this is what we did not do last time, is you can't just hit all and just select and say, hey, extract all the edge of travel way feature lines for the whole corridor. Honestly, that's how I used to do it before, and it worked fine. It's not how I didn't write the software. Before you just check the checkboxes on, send it to the, change it from no display to a style, go up to that dialog, pick it, pick the feature line you wanted to extract, it pulled it out, and you were done. So they've kind of rejiggered this a little bit. I kind of think for the worst, but it is what it is. What you want to do is go into create feature line from corridor, hit that. You got to pick the feature line, and right here where it says all or by region, we're going to want to do by region. And then at that point, it gives you specific regions that you can suck the stuff out of. So say we were going to do a driveway off of this side, I would pick this region, so you just kind of pick into it here.
All right, sounds good, thank you.
Yeah, one region, yeah, you kind of, it's just messed up. You pick into it, it says one region selected. You can pick another region if you want at that point. Just hit enter. That again gives you the selection for the edge of travel way and the back of curb for that region. You kind of shrink this stuff to make it cleaner. So this is the left side, right side, and this is the region itself. I'm gonna hit extract, and then that gives us just that region. So you can see that here. It's a little cleaner to go through if there's some erroneous stuff you don't want. You can, get that clipped out of there. Even here, I think there was, yeah, here was even a little messed up. I did this before and it was fine. I don't know why I got. Yeah, so here, like for example, you can see I have these lines come up to here and stop, but then these other lines go all the way through, but they're not at the right elevation here. So I'm going to just go ahead and select these and delete these. I don't really want those. My computer's going to pause, come on. But you can kind of clean it up a little bit, and that's, that's kind of what you're going to have to do if you have a larger corridor model like that. You got to be more selective of the feature lines you're going to extract. I wasn't anticipating my computer to lock up just because I wanted to delete one feature line. And then go from there. Is there any questions on that when I wait for this to hopefully come back?
No questions.
Is that clear? Is that clear as mud or clear as gray water?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Come on, computer. I don't know why this has to be difficult. Hold on, let me try to get this. Let's do this. Okay. So, is this going to work? Oh, there we go. Okay, so for commercial, so with that alignment stuff aside, with that clarification there, for commercial site grading, what we really want to be focused on is coming off the building. So in many cases, you have to kind of pick a first floor elevation to start with, right? And then you can change it later. You just got to start somewhere. So generally, I'm looking at the site, looking at the existing grade contours. We're turning off our OSNAP-Z. So it's OSNAP-Z. And we're going to set that to 0. And then when we do an ID, we should get the elevation. So if I can use, like, I turn off my OSNAP-Z to 0, that will enable that when I pick things now, it's going to pick the 3D elevation. So your OSNAP-Z variable, which is basically like a Z, what we call Z lock. It locks your snaps down to 0. So if you're if you're doing an endpoint snap to a contour, well, it's going to draw that. It's going to pick the X and Y location, but with OSNAP-Z set to 1, which is, it sets it to 1 every time you open a drawing in Civil 3D because of the HLS settings. That could be changed, but it's what I recommend. It would draw that polyline at 0 elevation, but it's using the X and Y coordinates from whatever you snap to. So you're drawing all your line work down at 0. So for your day-to-day operations, that's really what you want. And more importantly, when you're doing a distance, command, and then you do like nearest from here to here. See, with OSNAP-Z not turned off, you got to make sure you're keeping an eye on this right here, because this distance right here, that's 70.0538 feet, but that's not just the X and Y. That's with the Z coordinate too. So it's basically doing the square root and square, you square these 3 numbers, do the square root of them. That's the distance you're getting here. And that's why specifically the OSNAP-Z is turned to 0 every time you start a drawing. So again, with OSNAP-Z set to 1, which is by default every time you open a drawing. Now when I do a distance command, say I measure from this contour to this contour, see that 0 is always going to be Z now. So that's actually giving you the distance. So that comes into play, like if you're measuring from one point to another point, like a survey point, and you can snap to the node, like NOD, to go to the exact survey point. If you don't have OSNAP-Z set to 0, you're going to get the 3D distance. Well, that's not what you really want. You just want the 2, most of the time. I mean, I don't think I've ever snapped between points and actually wanted the 3D distance. I just want the 2D distance. And you just don't want to make that mistake. It could be costly if you make that mistake. So again, but now we're in the grading. So how I've this is my mindset, this is how we operate, is that if you're handling grading, like grading's a kind of a higher level CAD, you're not just drafting markups, you're designing stuff. And if you're able to, if that's in your toolbox, you can handle turning off OSNAP-Z. You might get certain engineers that aren't into CAD a ton, and you don't want to make a mistake and measure in the wrong distances because of the OSNAP-Z thing. So let's do OSNAP-Z. We're going to set that to 0 because we are going to grade. And we're going to do the ID. So that's a nice little command to just pick any point and get a X, Y, and we're more important to the Z elevation. So you can see this at 608, okay? So there's a couple options here. There's a command called elevation. So I could set my elevation command to 608, right? And then I can draw a line, or polyline, and then that polyline, if I click on it and hover over one of the nodes, you can see down here, shut some of this stuff off. You can see down here, if I hover over the node, take a look down here at just in general. If I don't hover over anything, look at my X and Y and Z coordinates. So that's another thing. If you're doing site grading or any type of grading, which this is not on by default anymore, is you're going to want to click into this little 3-bar general thingy over here. And up at the very top, it says coordinates. Go ahead and turn that on so you can see your coordinates down here. I use that a lot. Maybe you use other methods. It's fine. I'm going to show you the method I use. Works for me. Use the acronym a lot, like, hey, if you can make a cheeseburger in Pittsburgh with these ingredients, well, if you make a cheeseburger with the same ingredients somewhere else, same techniques, it should work. If that's a good tasting cheeseburger, you get the same thing. So I'm going to show you one way to make a cheeseburger. There's other ways to make a cheeseburger, but this is how I do it. Works for me. If you go down this route, I know it will work for you. But like again, there's other ways you might find even better ways. That's then you can evolve your technique. So anyways, have your OSNAP coordinates on. You can see the stuff. You can see with what the elevation command does is it lets me tell what elevation I'm going to be drawing stuff at. So if I put this down to 0, now this is down to 0. If I go back and put this at 608, now I'm at 608. If I draw a polyline, it's going to be at 608. Now, but if I draw a polyline and my OSNAP Z is turned off, so I'm going to grab and snap to this building corner and click over here, you can see that that polyline is not necessarily at 608. See that? It's at 609 because I actually unluckily snapped to something that is at elevation. Normally, you might start to notice things like this line work really shouldn't be up at elevation. So you might start to notice things that you can fix up. So let's just use this, for example, this curb line. If I do my snaps to that, you can see if I hover over that node and look down at my coordinates here, although I'm at drawing elevation 608 because I set my elevation command, I actually drew that down at 0. Well, why? Because my OSNAP Z was turned off. So if I type in my OSNAP Z again, turn that back to 1, do the same thing. I'm going to draw a polyline, my OSNAP Z, my elevation, my planar elevation that I'm telling things to draw is at 608. I turn my OSNAP Z back on, and I'm going to do a polyline again and snap to the end of this curve radius, pick over here. Now if I pick on that, now that's, even though I snap to an object that's at layer or at elevation 0, now, and because my OSNAP Z is now turned on, it's actually going to draw everything at 608. So OSNAP Z basically makes it draw everything on the Z and measure everything on the Z coordinate for whatever it's reading down here at your coordinate value down here. So, and then you can change this. Normally it's defaulted at 0. You can change that to be whatever level of elevation you want. So we use that to our advantage in grading. Polylines are great tools for if you want something to be at a certain elevation, and that's it. I don't want it like a first floor elevation. I want it to be at 608 all the way around the building. And even I could do that with a 3D, with a feature line or a 3D polyline. Sure, I could do that. But that they may get tweaked or adjusted, and next thing you know, your first floor is not all the same all the way around. Where if I use a feature line or a polyline, that's just not an option. Like if I draw this polyline here and pick a couple points, and then I look at that polyline in the properties dialog, I only get, I can cycle through the different vertices. You can see this little pointer here, that little X on the screen, and I can change this and tick through. But I only get an X and Y, and I can manually adjust these here to whatever number I want. But you notice I do not get a Z coordinate for that vertice. The only thing I have for the entire polyline is 608. So that polyline, by definition, is going to be at one elevation or another. You're not going to be able to vary the elevation of each vertice with a polyline. Like in its coordinate, like a circle is a circle can't be a square. Well, why? Because the definition of a circle means it's a circle, and a square is a different thing. You can't convert a circle into a square because then it's no longer a circle. It would then be a square, that kind of a thing. So a polyline, by definition, can only have one elevation. We use that to our advantage. So what's the difference between a polyline and a 3D polyline? We covered this a little bit before. That's the difference. A polyline has one elevation. A 3D polyline can have multiple elevations, can have an elevation at each vertice. So if I type in 3D poly and pick a couple points, Now if I grab that and look at that in AutoCAD, now I have a vertice per, or elevation per vertice. See that? So I can adjust this. I can make this 610 or 601. I can do the next one. You can kind of see it adjusting here on the right. 615, that kind of thing. So I can kind of pan this over now. And you can see the one I can move the Z's up and down, the other one I cannot. Okay. So the two things I've shown so far are just AutoCAD, like a polyline. Everybody uses a polyline, right? You probably haven't really used 3D polylines that much, but ServCAD uses 3D polylines. It doesn't have feature lines. So any software other than Civil 3D uses either polylines or 3D polylines. That's it. A feature line essentially is a 3D polyline, but it's like coded in other goodness, basically what I'd say. You know, a feature line can be a part of a site, and then they're dynamic to each other, and you have those special feature line tools up there, and you know, they just sprinkle on some pixie dust to make it a little bit more usable. But at the core base of it, it's just a 3D polyline. Okay, so with those two fundamentals, how you grade out commercial sites is with polylines and 3D polylines. You use polylines when you want something to always be the same elevation, and 3D polylines. What you're making is break lines. That's all you're doing. You're just making break lines to then add to a surface for it to be contoured. Okay. So go back. I can't remember where I'm exactly at with everything. So I'm going to go Z, O snap, Z. I want to set that to 1. I'm at 608. So go ahead and pick, I guess, 608. So type in elevation, and put it at 608. Hopefully you have your building up here. And I want you to trace out the building footprint. So go ahead and just, I guess over here, what do we have? This, let's just do don't do like the whole addition future thing. We'll just do the straight up building footprint. Make sure your Z lock, again, is at 608. So that when you snap to this first point, you're at 608. And then just go around and use your O snaps to trace this out. And if you have a 3D view here, you should start to see, as I'm tracing this, it draw in 3D. Go ahead and do that. I'll go straight through here. And again, as you're doing this, and you might be thinking, well, I could extract that and adjust. Yeah, sure, you can do this other different ways to get the same thing. Okay. We know when everybody has that traced. Restart it. So the next thing I want you to do, and so we're all in the same perspective, is I honestly use the orbit command. Like I'll have the two different views up here like I'm showing. Honestly, a lot of times you guys have two different screens. I usually drag AutoCAD across both and then put this thing right in the middle where both screens kind of, you have that dead zone. And then you have on the one screen the 3D perspective, on the other screen the 2D perspective. But I don't have that kind of real estate here. But usually I'll use the orbit command to kind of rotate things around. The orbit takes a little getting used to, but you'll get, you know, you start using it, you get used to it. Just to get everybody in the same spot, DDV, if you type in DDV point, so it's dynamic dialog viewpoint, just set this down to 270 and 25. So put this at 270 and 25, and then we'll all be looking at the exact same, you know, orientation of that. So on your 3D view, make sure you click into your 3D view first, then type in DDV point, and then, and I don't even think this command is even, it might be up in these, probably under the view tab, maybe if anywhere. I don't know, I just type it in all the time. And then that kind of offsets you back, so you kind of zoom in a little bit. Okay. Okay, so from here, the only thing that I didn't do well is that we want to have this on our surface feature line layer. So go ahead and grab that polyline that you made and move that up to this layer right here, this object surface feature. And we're going to go into our layer dialog as well. And we're going to make that a separate color. I'll do that in the template. I'll get that done in the template, or it's just something small we should have done in the template. We'll make that color 40 just to stand out. So move that polyline to this layer, go into your dialog, and make this layer color 40 or some color. And then make that current, so you can double click on it here to make it current as well. So what we want to do is that we want to have all our feature lines or polylines, whatever we're going to use to make up the grading, we want to have it all on this layer. Okay? And the reason is simply for selection. So we can say, select that layer and add that to the surface, and it will grab everything. Because we're going to get into an iterative process where we're going to grab everything on that layer, add it to the surface as break lines, and we're going to say, it's not, like, oh, I messed up. I didn't add in that curb, or I didn't do something a certain way, or, you know, I got to keep going on the design. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to delete all the break lines in the surface, or proposed surface, make my adjustments, and then add them all back in. So you're going to have one break line set that you're constantly deleting, adding in the new one. Now, once it's added in, it's dynamic. So you could say, oh, I just need to tweak it. So I'm going to just, you know, use some of the feature line editing tools and tweak that out, which you can do, and then the surface will rebuild automatically. But at the end of the day, this is a workflow-based thing. We're going to be adding these feature lines and polylines, whatever, can be anything. You know, 3D lines, points, feature lines, 3D polylines. They're all going to be on that layer for what makes up our proposed grading, and we're all going to add it to this grade surface. And under here, I've seen other ways where people get hundreds of break line sets. And then the problem is you have no idea which break line set is with which feature lines. You could try to go through the process of elimination and go down through and like do select and see which ones it selects, and it's just, the workflow is horrible. What you need to do is just have one break line set. So let's make some break lines. Okay, so we have this feature line here. From this point, now we want to turn off our O snap Z. So O snap Z, we're going to turn that back off. So set that to 0. All right, so the next thing we really want to draw out here is the face of curb, right? We want to get to the back of curb. I'm assuming this is like a Weis or a grocery store or something like that. Is that what this is? Tractor Supply?
Church.
What is it?
It's a church. It's a church.
Oh, church. I'm way off. I saw the double door, and I don't know, I was thinking grocery store, Tractor Supply, or something like that. All right, so it's a church. It's fine. It's kind of all the same. So this is a curb. I'm going to assume, at least for our design, that there is going to be a 6-inch curb reveal here. I'm assuming, I guess, the curb comes out to here, kind of juts back. Okay, that sounds good. So the first thing we need to do is get from this corner out. We want to go, usually curbs are 2%, like you have a 2% cross slope away from the building. You could do 1%, but I usually use 2. I think everybody uses 2. So what we want to do here is we're going to grab our feature line tool. So we're going to go up to feature lines, hit, first thing you want to do is kind of zoom into this corner. So here's how I kind of look at this. I need to square, I'm always looking for squares. I don't know how the best way to say it. I'm always trying to square things off. So when I'm looking at this complicated shape, what I see in my brain is this. If I draw a feature line that comes out at 2% here, I connect it to another feature, and if I draw another feature line that comes out at 2% here, I connect these two feature lines across here like that. Then I can just make a temporary surface. I'll just add this feature line, and this, this other one over here too, to a surface, this temp surface real quick. Then I will, the rest of this in here, I will just draw a polyline on there and drape it onto that surface, and now I'm done. I have the whole top of the curve done. So let's do that. And we'll go from there. We're gonna go one step at a time. All right, so we're gonna delete that, because I was just kind of showing you. I'm always trying to square things off, like when you see complicated geometry, you wanna simplify that. Like, how can I simplify this geometry to its core thing? So I'm zoom into this corner. We're gonna go up to feature lines. We're gonna hit create feature line. We're gonna put it into the master. We're gonna leave all the defaults. You can see it's set to our current layer, which is good, that's what we want. We're gonna hit OK. We're gonna pick the end here. Now, we have to have our OZ, our Z, or OSNAP Z turned off, which we already did. That would, if we didn't, that would say 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, even though we picked this elevation, which is 608. Now, you could just type in 608, technically, if you made a mistake, but that becomes annoying. You don't want to keep having to do that. So it picked up whatever elevation I snapped to here, which was the first floor elevation. Going to accept that. We're going to come into our plan view. We're going to type in perpendicular, pick here, and then it's saying, okay, I'm picking up this elevation. I'm coming out, going perpendicular to this curve face. What do you want me to do elevation-wise? So I'm going to hit G for grade, which actually there's no G option here because we're in grade. So it's asking me for a grade. The default is 0. I don't want 0. I want -2. Enter, and hit enter again. So now you can see if I grab that feature line and I hover over this point, even in 3D view, you can see the back, based on that geometry, the top of the curve, if it was squared off here, would be at 607.4. 004. But it's 607.4. So that's that point. What we can easily do then is just copy this. Like, we don't need to do that again. We can just copy this feature line over to this other corner. Okay, so now we have 2 of them. They're starting at the same elevation, they're ending at the same. So then at that point, all we need to do is, usually I would connect in between with the feature line. So I'm going to go back into my feature line command again. So I guess go ahead and draw that grade -2%, copy it over to the next one, copy it over to the next corner like I showed here, and then let me know when you're at that spot. I don't want to keep zipping too far along. So once you have those 2 drawn in there, you go back up to feature line, hit the feature line tool again, just hit OK. The defaults are good. I'm going to snap to this endpoint. It's going to say 607.4 like we anticipated. Snap to this endpoint. It tells me, since G for grade is the default, it's going to tell me what the grade is between those 2. So I look down here a lot and I see 0, and I'm anticipating 0. Good deal. That's what I want. Hit enter again. Okay, so now we have that drawn. At that point, I'm going to go into, and we'll get into the practice here, I guess now, with the selection by layer. So the only thing that's on this layer, the only line work, is that 3D polyline for the first floor, and then those feature lines to come down the face of the top of the sidewalk. So go ahead and hit save. My computer here a second. So what I want to use now is the QSelect command. So if you type in QSelect, this is an AutoCAD command. It's been in there forever. So type in QSelect. What this allows you to do is it's basically a Boolean operation that allows you to, select through a drawing or objects. You can use this for a lot of stuff. You can say, I want to select all the parcels and blah, blah, blah. There's different object types here. So I use this a lot to, like, if I wanted to, like for this project, to clean out, to get this file that's just the text or the line work, I went into your base file that you sent me originally. And I said, okay, I want to get all the text out of this drawing. So I'm going to go QSelect. I hit mText, right? And then I hit select all, and I hit OK. It selected all the M text in the entire drawing. I W blocked it out and used the W block erase thing. Then I go back into the same drawing or the same command. Then there's also, it's not in here anymore, but there's also dtext as an object type. There's text as an object type. There's Q leaders. There's dimensions. So I just went through and just hit, all the text type objects, hit select all, and then W blocked them out. And then what you're left with is just the line work. And you can do it the other way if like you want to grab all the polylines, all the lines, that kind of stuff. And I don't even actually block them out independently. You can go in multiple times. Like for example, I could go into here and I could say polyline, for example, hit select all, hit OK. It's going to select the polylines in this drawing. Then I could go back and Q select again. See how that's still selected, that polyline? Then I can come back into the Q select command and I could say, okay, I want to add in, I guess there's a piece of M text. I don't know. Feature lines. Let's get into feature lines. Where is it on feature line? I can do that. I can hit OK. Now you can see it's going to keep this, since this is checked on, it's going to keep this and then add in the feature line. I hit OK. So now I have all the polylines in the drawing and all the feature lines. I've just selected. So you can kind of use that command. If you haven't used QSelect a lot, it's a pretty powerful tool. Anyways, get back into QSelect. You don't have to have anything, highlighted. And what we're going to use is we're not going to use, we could do it through the polyline feature line thing, but it's much easier to just leave it as multiple. So it's any object type, and we're going to hit layer, and then we're going to go down here, and we're going to move this up and hit the feature line, that layer that we're currently on. So we're going to select that whole layer. So go ahead and set this to go into QSelect. Set this to the entire drawing, multiple, layer, equals, and then that layer. Hit OK. Now in this drawing, you should have a temp surface. Does everybody have a temp surface?
You guys have one? No.
If you do not, yes or no?
Looks like no.
Okay, so right click on the create surface at the top, hit create surface. Go ahead and make one _temp. Set the style that you're going to use, set that to one of these ref1 or ref2. So the ref1 and ref2 again are just, they're reference surfaces. It makes contours, but they look a little different, so you can kind of tell they don't all look the same. So set it to either ref1 or ref2. There's no difference other than ref1 is one type of color and ref2. You could have ref3, ref4, as many as you want. And then just hit OK after you're done making that. So I'm going to call this temp 2, I guess. Okay. So now you should have a temp surface in there. We're going to go down under the definitions, right click on add break lines. Since I already had the break lines selected, since I made the selection prior to going and clicking on add break lines, that's why this dialog came up right away. It didn't ask me to select anything because it's already been selected. So you always go into Q, select first, select the whole layer, then you just go under break lines, hit add break lines, you just hit OK. And that will make our reference surface. You can see it must have grabbed some, I got some stuff down here. Delete that. There's not much in it because it's just, the first floor and the face of curve, but you can see it did draw one contour. And it drew one contour because of the vestibule up front. I'm going to overlook something here that you would need to normally address. Let's just address it, I guess. Let's address that. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff that comes up that you have to kind of think through. Did everybody get that done successfully? Should have like this one contour going like that.
Hold on a minute. We got.
Okay, so this is a real scenario here. We have this first floor, and then this is the question. What do we want to do here? This vestibule, do we want the vestibule to maintain at first floor elevation or be at the same slope as the sidewalk? Because that sidewalk's coming down 2%. Right now, this vestibule's at 0%, right? And then from here to here, it's actually a little steeper than 2%. So one of the things that you could do is just simply look at it. You could say, okay, well, what is that percentage in between there? So if I go and use my feature line tools, I can kind of get an idea and you end up doing this a lot. So I'm not going to keep talking through this. I'm going to say like create a feature line. You end up going into create a feature line a lot and then just hit OK. So I'm not going to say that all the time. So I usually just hit a feature line here, and then I'll come down and I'll pick, you'll pick a point. Unfortunately, I can't use, I don't think I can use perpendicular. Yeah, it worked, okay. So perpendicular, so I pick the point there, hit perpendicular, and you can see that's at negative 2.8%. So is that what you want? That's the question. If not, there's a couple things you can do. At this point, I could say, okay, negative 2%, and then that would raise that up. So we could go negative 2. And then, I don't know if you saw that, but that just bumped that curve face up a little bit. Okay, so let me do it again on this side. So if I'm using my feature line tools on the feature line, snap to here, it's picking up 608, great. Come over to here, I'm doing perpendicular to this feature line. It's telling me now, since I made that tweak now, that this corner of the vestibule is at negative 2.24, and make that negative 2. Watch on the 3D view, it's very subtle, but as I did, it's super subtle. As I did that, it just raised this feature line up. That's the power of the feature line. Since I drew this, and since these are all on the same site, now that I've commanded in a new slope, since these two things touch right here, it's going to make this one adjust automatically. And then you'll see that I'll need to do a rebuild on this temp surface for that to take effect. Now it doesn't really change anything in the temp surface since it was kind of doing that already, but that's why this contour is coming across like that. You can see, because that's a slope change. But essentially now we have 2%, 2%, and this feature line is adjusted. If we click onto that feature line, we can see these percentages. Like you can see, like, okay, now this is negative 2%, that's negative 2%, 0 across. And this is actually such a low slope, from here down to here, it's so long that slope is actually beyond the third decimal place in the percent. So that's looking pretty good. So that's what we're going to go with. So go ahead and give that a practice where you draw a new feature line from here, bring it out. You can use perpendicular and then command in the negative 2%, which will then raise this edge. Once you have that done, let me know. resume recording. So the next thing we're going to do is add these break lines into our temp surface just for good practice because it's a class kind of a thing. So we're going to go into our temp. I want to get these new 2 feature lines in there. I'm going to go grab my break line set, hit delete. So now that temp surface is empty again. I'm going to type in QSelect. After I do that, if I just click on layer, this is already now, it retained those settings. So I just click on layer under QSelect. It already has that. It didn't like forget which layer I picked last time, which is awesome. I'm gonna hit OK. It picked up those 2 additional feature lines. I'm gonna right click on add break on break lines here, hit add, and hit OK again. And you can see I kind of get the same result, but I just wanted to go through that. All right, so once you have that traced out, then all we have to do is go up into create feature line from object. Since we have that surface, that's basically the plane of the top of the sidewalk. We're going to get create feature line from object. We're going to pick that traced. I already had it selected. If you don't have it selected, you have to pick it. And then we're going to leave all the defaults except for we're going to assign elevations. Go ahead and hit pick from object, pick that thing, assign elevations. We're going to use our temp surface. And I'm not going to do intermediate grade breakpoints. No. So surface, temp surface, the one that you add the break line set to. And then you'll see over here on the right-hand side, when I click this, watch, you can just pause what you're doing for a second and watch what happens here. This feature line's down at 0, and it's going to drape up onto this elevation. Nope. Apparently that surface didn't go far enough out. So that did not work there. Let me look. Yeah. This little endpoint snap here, it snapped it down to 0. So let's fix that. I'm going to go with 0. Okay. Did you guys get the same result?
Yeah, mine's doing the same thing, except it's like on the other end.
It shouldn't be on this end. The reason it did that is because the surface extent, there must be an offset in the curve. You can see it. The geometry is not. Let's cover this. If your geometry, your layout geometry is not pretty accurate, like if there's inconsistencies and offsets by a little bit, or like things aren't exactly 90 degrees, you will notice that during grading. We used to get a thing where we'd had certain people doing the layouts and other people grading it, and then the grading people were like, hey, your layout's all messed up. You know, these parking lot aisles aren't 90 degrees, and then you measure them, and they're like, they're 90 degrees. They're like, no, they're 90.00125 degrees, which when I'm retracing everything out with the grading objects shows up. Like, it just, yeah. So it's important to have, and that could be, well, I don't know why that would be like that here, but this offset, that's why that happened. See how that happened there? So, what can we do here? So this one didn't go all the way out. So what we can do is, I'm gonna go ahead and undo that, I think is what I would do. in reality. I'm just waiting, just doing my undos until that feature line goes back to nothing right there. You know what? I saw it undo there. And I still have this traced polyline. And all I really want to do here is I want to extend to this, that, and then I'm going to grab this and snap it to the endpoint here. Okay. And then I'm going to go over here and just give it a look-see. Looks like we're good to go there. My temp surface, usually I want to have that set to automatic rebuild. Yeah, good. I want to have that set to automatic rebuild, and then, which it is, and then I will just go ahead and do surface object, pick that, assign elevations, temps picked because it was picked last time. Oh, it still did it. So I'm not getting far enough out. My surface isn't far enough out. All right, well, we'll just do a little exercise here then. Why is that not getting far enough out? It looks like it's far enough out. I guess it's not, ever so slightly, it's not out there far enough. Okay, so how do I want to do to fix this up? So let's do this. We're going to offset that feature line. Erase this one, and then extend these other feature lines to it. So we get plenty of coverage. Okay, that's what that did. I'm going to go then into my feature line tools. I'm going to check this slope, make this -2. Make -2. Make this -2. Okay. Let's make sure this works here quick. Sign. Okay. Okay, again. There we go. Okay, so let me back up. So what you want to do is this off. What the issue we're having here a little bit, and this will come up, is we're trying to have things, you know, right on top of each other, and technically the surface wasn't going, you know, this curved face was trying to. You're trying to get, or, you know, splitting hairs. So the best way to do that is just offset this whole feature line. So grab this feature line, just use the offset command, offset it a foot. So take this feature line, offset this a foot out. Then extend these, you can just use the extend command to extend these these break lines down to it. And then just grab one of them and go into your quick elevation editing tool. And then you can hover over each one of those. And if it's not at -2%, like each one of these, and you make sure you're pointing down. If it's not at -2%, then click it, and then you can type in -2 and adjust it to be -2. So first offset this down, let me back up, and I guess step through it with you. All right, let's step through it one by one. So we're gonna first offset this out. Just use the offset command, use 1 foot, grab this outer feature line, offset that out. Okay. We're gonna delete the one in between. Then we're gonna extend the control feature lines to that. Just extend those out using the extend command. Let me know when you got to that spot where you extended them out. Then grab on one of the feature lines, which brings up the tool up here. Make sure, and then click on this quick elevation editing tool. It's right up there. You can hover over each one of these feature lines. You can see how this is not at -2 anymore, right? So I'm going to click, making sure the arrow is pointing away from the building. So it's going to hold behind the arrow. I'm going to click in and then type in -2. I'm going to do the same for all these other ones, like make sure those are -2, so we're good there. And then here, we're going to make this -2 as well, -2. Okay. I'm going to do a little something different here now since we're kind of doing the overshoot on this thing like this. We're going to trace out the rest of this curve. I hope this is in between here. Let's okay, should be good. So since we've kind of overshot, we've extended that face out, I'm just going to trace in the rest of this curve top. Use a polyline edit command to join them together. One big top of curve face. Maybe that's how I should have did it to begin with. Let me know when you get to that spot. We're going to do create feature lines from object again. Have that curve face selected. Hit assign elevations. Rest of the defaults are good. Hit the temp. Why is it doing that?
That's weird. Mine came in fine.
Yeah, mine's stupid. Just hold on, let me catch up. Get all these break lines added. Yay, finally. Okay, So you can see now we have the top of the curve. Does everybody have something that looks like this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so from this point, we have that curve face. So now we can kind of trim out some of these things. Like we don't need all of some of this line work. What we're going to do is we're going to literally trim it out. We're going to use the feature line trim command once my computer gets back out of this stupid thing. We don't need this feature line out front here anymore, so we'll just go ahead and erase that. We'll pick one of the feature lines. You can't use the AutoCAD trim command. You can use the AutoCAD extend command to extend feature lines, but you can't use the AutoCAD trim command to trim feature lines. Don't ask me. You go click on one of the feature lines up here at the top. There's a trim command. Click that. Click the outside curve, and then start trimming these off. And it will trim them back to what we need here. For this one, it doesn't look like it's going to want to trim that for us, so we're going to use the break command. Hold on a second. So on the break command, so if you got those trimmed out, on the break command, again, you select the feature line. You come up to this break up here, and then you have to pick the feature line again, if it was the same one. But you can see it does that break first thing. You know, it's going to want to break it here. It's asking for the next point. If you just hit first and then snap to where the curve return comes back to that feature line, like that, you can see it's my O snaps to the end there now. Click that, and then just hit enter after you do that. Now it broke that. Now I can select the remaining end there, and it kind of trims that off. After that, I want to grab this feature line. I'm going to join. I'm going to hit grab this curved feature line. Hit J for join. I'm going to join it to this little end segment here that I just trimmed or did a break on. So now it's all joined together. And you should have something looking like this. Let me know when you get to that spot in here. So what I want to do is I want to come off this edge of this building again, and I want to come off at usually a 2% slope here, and then come down at 2% as well here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back up to feature line, create feature line, hit that, hit OK. I'm going to grab the edge of this building, which should be at 608. I'm going to go perpendicular. And I'm going to go perpendicular not to this curved face, but I'm going to come all the way out to this curved face. So pick that. And then it asks me a grade, type -2. And now I have a 2% cross slope out across there. Do that same thing, but grab the basically where these parking aisles would line up. So I'm going to just watch here on the screen, and then I'll let you do this all in one shot. So we're going to grab this edge, come down at 2%. And if you're in the middle of that, just kind of pause here for a second and look back up. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to grab the other spots. So I'm going to grading object again, or a feature line. I'm going to use my parent intersection command. I want to get a spot where this parking tree hits this curb face. Okay? So I'm going to use my parent intersection command. I'm going to go in 3D view. I'm not going to use a parent intersection again as a dual snap command. You have to pick 2 points and it will make the apparent intersection. The first snap point I pick is going to be the 3D. It's going to pick up the 3D elevation from there. And if I do that over here, it may get the feature line, or it may get that line down at 0 below it. Whereas if I come over to the 3D view, it's only going to get the feature line. See how it's the X with the dot, dot, dot? So I'm going to pick anywhere along this feature line. And then I'm going to click back over into my 2D view, and then hover over top of my parking tree island. And you can see now you see the little squares up there? I wish I could point to it, but look right in this area. If I hover right here, you can see it's gonna pick that. That elevation, see where it says, it told me the correct elevation. It picked up what the elevation is from this feature line, our first pick. So that apparently is 607.56. I'm gonna pick that. And then I'm gonna come down to here. I'm gonna go down to perpendicular to this. Hit that and do -2% for grade. So now I have this edge, I have this projected out all the way over here. And we're gonna, you can see this is grading down this way. So I have to really examine the grades here, but it looks like there's actually a low point of the parking lot up through here. So we'll hold that. I'm gonna come down this corner as well. So I'm gonna do the same thing. Let me think about this a little bit. So as I'm thinking about this, why don't you draw in this feature line and then this feature line coming out through here. Trying to put in what the grades are shown here. Okay, yeah, that's how I'm gonna do it. Let me know when you have that. Resume. Use my feature line tool again. I want to do that same thing again, where I want to do the parent intersection of this parking tree feature line, and then I'm going to use one of these space things. Hit that. That tells me that elevation. Then I'm going to bring this down across here, and I'm going to go right to the center of where we want to let water into this forebay. I'm going to come right to here. I'll do an endpoint snap to that. And I'll make my cross slope -2%. That brings that down. Now I can clean this up a little bit by coming in and connecting a feature line from this endpoint to this endpoint. See what that slope is. That was 2%, 2.18%. That's fine. That's within reason. I do want to then come back. You can see now I kind of squared this off, right? Go ahead and get that drawn in. Squared off there. And you can, now that we have, so when you drew this feature line from here to here, you could look down at the prompt, but even if you wanted to come back, you could always just grab any feature line, go up to the quick elevation tool, and you can kind of use this, see how you can kind of use that just to see like, oh, this is a positive 2.8%. This is 2% down this way, it's 2% that way, that's 2% coming down or going across here. And you can kind of use this just to verify like, oh, are those percentages okay? And if they're not, if you hit one that you're like, ooh, that's a little steep, well, you can just click and then adjust it to what you want it to be. Then that will automatically, whatever feature lines it touches, they'll adjust to match what you just entered. Like, okay, if you're telling me now this needs to be 3% down, that means this other one needs to go down too. And then if you do that, then you can say, okay, well now is that other one okay? So you can you can get everything drawn, and then you can use a quick elevation to kind of massage everything to be like, okay, you know, normally parking lots, you're trying to be 2% cross slopes. You know, that gives nice drainage during a nice heavy rainstorm, but not too steep that car doors are, you know, swinging open and hitting other cars and stuff like that. So we've kind of massaged it, looked at everything. One thing we do need to add here, though, is we don't have an elevation point along this, and that you do want to, since that's kind of a control point. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this feature line, hit add elevation point, and then just snap right to the end of this line here. And whatever elevation it says, just hit enter for it, hit enter again. Now that puts an elevation point. And we need that elevation point there so we can do the next thing where we go to quick elevation editor. Now we can, now with that elevation point there, it gives something to hold so that you can then get this little arrow to show going down slope. We don't want that to be -2%. We want it now to be +2%. So we're going to click into that and change that to +2%. If you're looking on your 3D perspective here, now you can kind of see we're going down and then back up. And that's what we want. That's what this contouring is showing. There's kind of a low point here, and then it's draining over to this forebay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to grading, create grades. Again, pick on this endpoint here. And we're going to do perpendicular up to this face. And we're going to keep along with the theme. We're going to go +2%. And then from there, we're just going to draw some feature lines at 0%. Looks like this is just flat. So you can go two different ways. I guess I'll use a polyline. Let's just see what it turns out to be. So let me use a feature line, I think, here. Let me grab that. I'm going to snap to the end here. Usually when I want to see how this is right over this striping.
Yeah.
I want to, whenever I have that scenario, I always want to try to snap using the 3D view. So I'm going to go to here. Because I don't want to risk, I mean, you can see it in the prompts, it would say 0, but you're surely going to get the endpoint at elevation if you pick this. So apparently that's 608.5, hit enter. I'm going to bring this over, go perpendicular to here. I'm going to go grade of 0. Just going to go 0%. And then I'm going to bring it down and snap it to here. And that's telling me that that is -0.24%. I'm going to make that 0, which is going to make this slope in between here and here a little bit steeper than 2%, but that's fine. I mean, it's really threading, you know, you're really threading the needle there. I mean, not everything has to be perfect percentages. You know, they're not gonna build this that close to begin with. So now we have this corner squared off. We can do the same thing down here. Add feature line. Do a snap to there. Perpendicular to this side. Grade of 0. And I'm going to snap this over to here. See what that tells me. That's -3%. Yeah, we'll hold that. We'll let that go. So this is flat along here, flat along here. And you can kind of hopefully see where we're going with this. We're on 2 hours now, so I want to try to wrap up. I guess that's a question. Can you see where this is going? Like how we're progressing through this? And
yeah,
you know, coming off the building. You have any questions?
No, but I get
here just to,
yeah, I see what you're saying. I can see how you're kind of getting it to slope down into the center.
Yeah, and just the progression of, let me make sure this is recorded, yeah. just the progression of you come off the building, you pick a first floor. Apparently I picked it pretty close. Apparently I think it is 608. I don't know. Whatever it is, you pick, usually you don't have contours to go by. You're just grading this from nothing. All you have is 2D stuff. You're coming off of that. You're getting what you establish what you know. I know that we're going to pick a first floor. I know that this is going to be 2% coming off here. I know that this parking lot's this way, this way. And you start just establishing out this framework. For this stuff in between here, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add all this to a surface. So let's do that together. Then in the temp, whatever you have drawn there, doesn't really matter. Let's just take it out of the temp. So go into your temp surface and delete that break line set. We're going to go prime time. We have this grades surface. We're going to right click on that. Well, first of all, we're going to get the stuff out of the temp so we don't see those temp contours. We're going to do Q select. We're going to hit layers. It's already selected, so it's going to highlight all these feature lines. Then we're going to go to break lines under our grades. Do you have a surface called grades?
Yes.
Okay. Make sure there's nothing underneath it. Now right click on it, hit add, and then just hit OK. And that will start to draw this out. You can start to see where, you know, there's work to do. It's not done. But we're starting to get this valley down through and across here. What the computer is not going to do, see how this is, now we don't have the same elevations as everything. We didn't draw this side over here. But you see how this these contours are, so add those to your break lines. Do you get a surface that shows the stuff?
Mine isn't quite, like yours are like square almost. Mine are like kind of going diagonal.
Yeah, it depends if you have this stuff drawn. Like if you don't have this, if you didn't get this drawn in.
I do. Yeah, I'm not sure why I did that.
Yeah. That's just a matter of what break lines you have and don't have and stuff like that. But ultimately, you can see the green contour, right? That's what Chris had drawn. And you can see what we're honing in on, although it's not, because we don't have the same elevations, and the building might not have been at 608. I think it was close, but I don't think it was exactly. And he might have used different grades. You know, we use 2% and all this kind of stuff. The intent is that when you're grading, you're not mimicking. You know, if Chris draws up the contours, you just trace the contours in and make a surface of that. But to grade in Civil 3D, this is how you do it. This is, you know, you're basically, when Chris is doing this by hand, he's doing this with the ruler. And then he's ticking off little spots of where this contour would cross when he has his ruler sitting across here. He's like putting a little tick. And then he's doing the same thing over here. He's putting a little tick. And then he's doing the same thing down to here. He's putting a little tick. And then when he's done, he just traces where those contour elevations would be. So the feature lines are the ruler. And instead of putting a little tick where the contours would be, where the even elevation of contours would be, we're letting the computer do that. You just add them to the surface and it generates the contours based off where you have the rulers. So these are basically the rulers, the break lines. You can see the shape is implementing now. This thing here, where, see how it's like curved through here? Civil 3D is not going to do that. If that's absolutely necessary, like what you generally would do then, once you get the general shape and everything, if you want things curvy, swervy like that, there's some, you want to look up things like surface smoothing. I guess it will do those. I shouldn't say it won't. There's an edit you can apply right here. Surface smoothing will kind of smooth everything out and give you more shapely contour stuff. I'm sure you can look in YouTube, or we can, if there's stuff, you know, if you have these questions on stuff as you're doing stuff, we can just handle them on a case by case. But ultimately then, if you want to make tweaks to this, at this point, you know, if I wanted to edit feature lines and just make small tweaks, like say I wanted to make this 3%, I can just go ahead and come in and do that. And then, you know, if I have this surface set to rebuild automatically, you can start to see the contours just automatically change. I don't have to keep re-adding them in. They're dynamic. If I made that -2%, I really want that to be 2%. And you can kind of see, you can start shaping things in based on that. Now back to where I was there. So these break lines are dynamic to that surface if you want to make auto rebuilds. Now, as you add more break lines, like you're drawing in more, like we have to draw in up here, and you know, we have a lot more to draw in, you wouldn't just add those as more break line sets. You would come in, right click, delete the entire break line set from the surface. It wipes out. You add more break lines added. You would do Q select. Pick the whole thing. Now pick layer, pick OK, and then add the whole set back in with the, you know, which would include your additional break lines. So that's kind of the process. Ultimately, you get to the farthest extents. For example, here, and I'll end with this because it's getting on pretty long. We're going to use you can just kind of watch up here. I'm going to do a create grading tool and use that. And do a grade to a surface. So I'm going to pick my EG surface. This is the surface I'm going to grade down to. I'm going to do a 3-to-1 slope. Pick this. You know, it's asking where do you want me to put it. I'm going to put it in the master. Hit OK here. Pick this exterior line. Pick the side. I'm going to do the whole length just for now. And it will do a grading object to daylight the surface, to daylight where you're at. When you're done with that, normally, then we talked about before, I usually explode this. Since we're on this layer, when it exploded, it put this feature line on that layer, and then that's just a feature line you'd add into the grading set just by deleting the whole grading group, adding that all back in. Ultimately, you get to the outer perimeter of stuff, you daylight things down, you get to the you do a cut to fill volume of the whole thing, right? And say we want to move this whole shooting match up or down. So what I will do is do a Q select. Layer, grab all the feature lines. I'm going to hit M for move. It's going to ask me my base point. I'm going to do 0, 0, 0. And say I want to move the whole thing up 1 foot because I did my cut to fills. You know, the grading of the commercial site looks good, like slopes and everything, but the whole thing's off balance. I want to try to get the site to balance better. Well, let's move the whole thing up 1 foot. So I'm going to do 0, 0, 0. Now it's saying, where do you want to put it? I'm going to do 0, 0, 1 foot. That's going to move the whole thing up. So I hit enter. And it just slid the whole and the surface rebuilt. But if I come into my first floor now, I hover over that point, see how the surface, the first floor now is 609. It's not 608 anymore because we shifted everything up. the contours, when I did that, these contours slid down, like they automatically moved because we just moved the whole grading set up, and they readjusted. So then you'd re-look at your cut to fill, make other little tweaks. It's just that process. It's just that process of going through and grading the site. Obviously, these outer daylight lines, you have to re-daylight those. You can't, we just move them up. So now they're not laying on the existing grade. They were on, that daylight feature line was on existing grade, but then we just shifted it up. So now we have to re-daylight down to hit existing grade again. So you have to use the grading object tool to do that. And then you redo your cut to fill. Coming up through here, obviously you'd have a corridor. Coming through here, you'd obviously establish the top of berm. You'd daylight down on both sides of the top of berm. Here, you would just let this grade in between your corridor model and your top of berm. It's a little bit of a process. It's one of those things, you have to do it on a site. You have to be like, listen, I'm going to grade this site out using feature lines. And you're going to have a zillion questions. You're going to run up against stuff, and you're just going to have to, give me a call. We'll work out stuff as you're getting through it. It takes practice to master it. And a lot of it's just grading. Just the fundamentals of grading to begin with. Any questions, I guess, as I went through that little whole explanation?